Welcome.
Thanks.
Good to see you. You look great.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I want to know more about that because
Okay.
we talked a little bit about it. I want to hear like what are you doing because you look fantastic.
Yeah.
From the last time I saw you,
Yeah.
like you look like you dropped like 20 pounds. You like put on like 15 pounds of muscle.
Yeah. So it's I think for the first time in my life, so I've gone to the gym a lot in the past. So for me it was like trying to figure out nutrition. And so I think I've had this weird like sense of like body dysmorphia in the sense of um like never knowing how poorly I looked, like when I looked in the mirror at the time,
Yeah.
to where now looking in the mirror now, maybe not knowing how good I look today. But so what I tried to do was,
Hold on, real quick though,
yeah,
before you get to
yeah.
what explain that more. Like how
So
poorly
like
you looked.
back, so like whenever I saw you last, right? So like 6 months ago or what have you, it was I was probably about 185 to 190. And so for somebody my size, when I got measured recently, I'm officially like 5'7.5". I think I'm slowly shrinking as I
Can't get
get
that
older.
half.
Yes, I know, right?
I'm with you.
And then it's one of those things where at that time that weight for me is probably not something that really where I
Yeah.
should be if it's not just all muscle.
Yeah.
And then but at the time I'm like, I'm pretty good, you know. So I'm that size, wearing larges, things like that. And then told myself though, look, I've done all the different like workout programs through most of the online trainers that you can meet or what have you. That stuff I know how to do. I've gone to the gym, I know certain workouts, what have you. Still don't necessarily know the difference between the snatch and the whatever else, the flip up. I don't know.
Snatch and
Some of
grab. All, yeah.
there you go. But so I wanted to get serious about nutrition because I've always been told that that's the real switch. So I had a friend of mine that I knew over at the gym. He was a coach there. Reached out to him. He's a bit older than me, but his physique is pretty like kind of where I wanted to get to. And so I ended up reaching out to him and worked out with him for about 90 days. And
Well, it's
then
interesting to
switched it
me,
over.
like because it does seem to me like you are more data driven. So it's
Yeah.
just surprising you would not have adopted this sooner.
Yeah, maybe it's just more like data-ish driven. I think the ish is probably the thing. Sounds, like the numbers. I like the result, so the end thing, but it's the chunk in the middle that gets a little annoying.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I always think of because I just make it simple,
yeah,
like with the process goals, product goals,
yeah.
like with like Jason Stone
Right,
talks
right.
about. It's like that the in between. We do focus a lot on the end,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Oh,
really
totally.
most important part is like that the middle.
It's the boring stuff day to day, right? Like I think it's just the idea of you want this idea of like uh, what I would call like sexy food, or you want, enjoyable, that umami. You want all of that, like as you eat. Eating like, what is it, a rice cake with peanut butter on it may not have that same umami of eating like really good sushi or whatever else, right?
So you talked about the boring stuff,
Yeah,
so I want to get into the
yeah.
boring stuff. You were talking about a guy you were following. Tell me more about the boring stuff, and because I want to ask you about related to the law firm things, and
Hmm.
you were talking about making money the boring way. So
Yeah.
tell me what you were talking about there.
So like, so the boring stuff in regards to like just how to make money
Exactly
or.
right.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, so just this pod recently though that I'm listening to, so it's a deep dive. So it's Ali Abdal's deep dive, and he just had his name's Andrew Wilkinson. I believe, at least in a quick look up on him, he went from being a barista to becoming a billionaire. Obviously, it didn't happen overnight through time. And he's talking about the idea too, though, that like most people think they want to be a billionaire, but like the reality is you don't really want to be a billionaire. He's like, there's a sweet spot of like 20 million, 20 to 30 million, where it's actually a really good spot to be. He goes, but he goes, when you look at it, because he acquires businesses. And so we were talking to about like Cody Sanchez, who does it. She doesn't buy like the new influencer type sexy business. It's the mom and pop shops. It's the laundromats or the dry cleaners or the parking lots, right? And that's the boring stuff because the boring things make money. But I think it goes back to the way you were saying though. So like even with in order to get fit or to grow a business, it's the boring stuff that we need each day that I think actually really end up paying the dividends.
Interesting. I'm gonna relate this back
Yeah.
to the fitness for a second.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean part of the reason why I'm talking so much about the fitness part of it too is
Yeah.
it relates so much to what we do practicing law.
Hmm.
The fitness being healthy and all, it is really really important. But so 75 hard, we
Yep.
both done 75 hard.
Yep.
I love 75 hard. I
Uh-huh.
think it's great. but it's more on that sexy side. It's
Uh-huh.
not the boring stuff.
Yep.
And I do think that that's a problem for some people
Yes.
because they think I'll do 75 hard and I'm good forever.
Yeah.
And it's not, and that's not the message at all that Andy Frisella
No.
passes on.
No.
It's like this is a lifetime thing,
Yeah.
right? And so I wonder, talk about 75 hard versus what the other stuff we were talking, the boring stuff.
So I want to talk about 75 hard, and then I'll talk about the 12-hour walk as well, because I think those two things kind of in tandem can work together. I have my thoughts on 75 hard. So I've done it. I've done 75 hard 3 times. I've completed it once. And so I was listening to Frizella the other day on a pod, and he was asked about like the success, like how people can succeed at it and not. He goes, it's when people say, I'm going to try it. So the try of 75 hard, he's like, that's when you fail at it. He's like, it's not something you try, it's just a thing you do for this period. But then whenever I finally completed it, I had a friend who did it, and he kind of gave me some tips on success pieces for this program. He goes, you have to be intentional, but you also have to plan for the full time. So I had a plan then where I literally put a post-it up on my bathroom to take the picture, the self picture. And then he's like, you also have to have a conversation too with your close friends and family about this. Can you swear on this?
Yeah.
About this wackadoodle shit that you're about to do here, because it is going to be a life changer for these next 75 days. So a lot of it is getting to that end of completion, right? So then I did it. Now, what was crazy for me though, I don't know if it's actually a life. I don't know if I agree with Andy where it becomes this. I think it's a thing you can tap back into because you've done it. But when people are like, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing it now forever and keep drinking a gallon of water every day, carry around my jug, do all this stuff. I personally don't find that that's a thing. I actually ended up stepping back from the gym for a while after that and ended up kind of going not reverse, but not it wasn't so it was like really high up here and then kind of here, not way back down, but you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
kind of and then got back into the gym again. I needed to find something that could kind of kick me back into it afterwards because it was such an extreme thing.
So that's interesting. I've heard other people say that.
Yeah.
Where I think well, some of the lifelong thing too is because Amy and I we did
Oh,
75
I've
hard
heard.
phases 1, 2, and 3, right?
Uh-huh.
And to us, I feel it was more of like a reset, and
Yes.
then the rest of it, it's a reset to okay, get us back to where we wanted to be,
Hmm.
and then you focus on health the rest of the time.
Right.
So it's not like, and I think that some people do view it as you do it one time,
Hmm.
we're good, and
Yes.
it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I like the idea of because I have another friend, he just did it for the third time, but he does it like once every couple of years. I even for myself, like we've talked about our affinity for like good bourbon or what have you.
Yeah.
I'll do a 30-day, like throughout the year, I'll do multiple like 30-day pauses. And so I think it's that idea too of being able to show like how to reset or be able to hit the pause button on something for a bit and then kind of kick it, and then
Yeah.
start again.
Let's talk about drinking a little bit.
Yeah.
Like what is your view on drinking? Because you talked about taking the 30-day reset and all that.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that a little bit.
So I have two parents that are alcoholics. My belief is my dad died from it, in some form or another. It had a huge effect on him. And then, but they were beer drinkers. My dad, whenever I was a kid, was told by my mom he drank liquor whenever I was younger, like whenever I was really little. Got really violent, and then basically was told, "Hey, if you don't stop drinking that, then I'm leaving." And then, so yeah, for me it was, we didn't. I don't know. I stopped drinking from like 19 to like I think it was like 30, like mid to late 30s.
The years when people usually drink.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so members of the Mormon Church didn't drink at all. Then when we left, took me a little while to get back in. But because of don't drink, don't think since then too, I don't drink beer at all. So went more the liquor route. And so for me, the idea of having the ability to pause is both a health piece, but it's also it's a gauge of kind of knowing what runs within the family as well. So to know that I've got some controllables on it. And so that's kind of the way I look at it now. But if we talk about it, I think it's enjoyable. It's my daughter and I, we talk about it quite a bit in that sense. The taste of it's great. I'd rather at times have a glass of bourbon instead of having like dessert or what have you. I think it's more enjoyable.
I think the way you just framed that's perfect. Where a major problem with especially lawyers
Yeah.
drinking is like the central part of what you're doing.
Mhm.
So let's go have drinks.
Right,
Is a kind
right,
of thing.
right,
Instead, you're not going to say, "Hey, let's go have a dessert," right?
right.
But if you view it as like, "Let's go have dinner,"
Yes,
and maybe I'll have a drink as a dessert.
right,
I think that's a perfect way to
right,
frame it.
right. Yeah.
Like, well, like, where'd you come? Is that something you came up with yourself?
No, no. I mean, we have massive sweet tooth, right? So, I mean, desserts are tasty, but it's one of those things where at the end of the day, I mean, when Megan and I talk about it, it's we'd rather go the other route. We'd
Yeah.
rather have a drink instead of having a treat. That is the treat.
I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure, sure.
I mean, can we talk about the partnership
Oh,
breakup?
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And I'm
an
sure
extent.
that there's some limitations,
Yeah.
but I guess how are you doing now? Let's talk about that. How are you doing? Because we're going to go back. I want
Yeah.
to talk about. Not going to dig
Sure,
too
sure.
deep, but
Yeah,
I do want to ask you about it. So, how are you doing now?
really well, actually. Better, a lot better than a few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm good now?
So partnership ended end of last year, or right, literally last day of last year. So probably it's taken about 5 to 6 months.
And yeah, I've had experience with this,
Yes,
and
yes,
mine was. I feel like mine may have been a lot easier.
yeah,
My
sure,
breakup was
sure.
8 days.
And mine was 2 weeks, technically.
Okay,
Technically, 2 weeks. Yes.
that's good.
Uh-huh.
That's good. How? Let's go back to when you realized it was this was going to happen, right? So how did it feel back then? You realized this is gonna break up. We've
Yeah.
spent several years building this thing,
7. Yeah.
yeah, and it's gonna break up. I mean,
Right.
how was that? Like, what was your mindset like?
So what was interesting is we had back and forth conversations actually about it earlier or mid last year. Um, and so just talks about what happens, you know what I mean? Is it something, is it time for a step away? And and just starting a conversation, right? Just in having that dialogue. And it just kind of kept, here and there at lunches or what have you, it just pop up and just talks. And then finally, I think mid December, beginning of December, is when it kind of really started coming into form. And then finally, yeah, at the end or kind of mid December, whenever Gretchen and I got back from a trip, we had a conversation, and me and the partner had a conversation, and that was kind of it. And
So I'm gonna
yeah,
tell you,
it's a quick speed up of it, but yeah,
yeah, and we'll get into more of it.
yeah,
I'm gonna tell you about my experience,
yeah,
and I want to hear what yours was
hmm
like. So the during the partnership, the whole time I was stressed because I was thinking, okay, I got to make sure that I'm doing everything I need to be
hmm
doing because I don't want him to be worrying about that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
right,
So like there was just constant stress, and
uh-huh,
then we have the conversation that we're going to break up.
hmm
I go for a long walk, think about it. Great. I
yeah,
drive home, talk to Amy, we have dinner. It was the best I'd felt the entire time of the
okay,
partnership.
uh-huh.
I wonder what your experience was like.
So it's interesting, and like as I've reflected back, is I think, and this would be for anybody in any position, I think one of my downfalls, and if I talked to him today, it's one of the things I'd say is I think I actually faltered in a way too of like wanting to mold my partner into a vision of what I believed a partner should be, which is it's a naivete on my part looking back now, having a piece of reflection. And obviously then, which means then though too, for all of it, for, a fair chunk of those years too, a lot of my internal thoughts and conversations were, you know, about whys, like why this, why that, what have you. And the reality is he was doing the best he could with what he knew, you know what I mean, in that sense. I never felt because I had shifted more towards the business role. And I know a lot of people run that idea of like, if I'm not doing the cases, I feel less than, or, that they could
Sure.
look at me as not doing my share. I actually view the business side as being such a massively integral part over the day-to-day lawyering.
I think with that,
Yeah,
let's stay on
yeah,
that for just a second. I agree. There's a perfect model of looking at this.
right,
Morgan.
right.
the most important part of that business is the business
Oh yeah,
side.
yeah,
Not to say that the litigation they got Keith Mitnick, one of
which
the
is bananas.
who
Yes,
maybe if he's not the best, he's
he's
one of
in
the
the
top
top
five,
tier. Yeah,
right? Best trial lawyers in the country,
right.
right? So there is no there is no Mitnick without Morgan and Morgan.
Kind of. Yeah.
Maybe
No,
I
I know what
guess,
you're saying though. Yeah.
but Morgan Morgan's going to be around no matter what.
Right.
And I don't mean to diminish Mitnick at all.
No,
By the
no,
way,
but I know what you're saying.
he's an amazing lawyer.
Yeah.
His brand is far bigger because of working for Morgan Morgan.
Right.
But he's
Right.
still an amazing trial lawyer.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think that trial lawyers in general don't view it that
Mm-mm.
way. And we're trial lawyers.
Yes.
So, but generally in our profession,
Right.
it's not viewed that way.
Right.
And why do you think that is? Because I agree with you 100%.
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about off camera earlier is the idea that the badge of honor that we all wear after getting our number and our license is I am a lawyer, right? So
Yeah.
from the Clark Kent piece when you wake up in the morning to changing and putting your S on, it's lawyer. It's not business owner. It's not CEO. It's not entrepreneur. It is lawyer. So I am titled now as a lawyer. The reason that I can own a law firm in most states is because I'm a lawyer. And I think that that's the reason why there's that like thing. So if I take this piece off and I just do X, I'm just like the guy down the street that owns a convenience store, right? He's just a business owner, but I think it's so different. It's different in that sense too. It just depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, because you were talking about you're a friend of yours, how like, it is almost like, yeah, you're putting on
Yes.
This costume, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's more of
Yeah.
a costume than
Yeah.
anything
It
else.
is. Yeah.
But it is even worse with trial lawyers, I think. I
Oh,
think
sure.
we do like, it's
Oh,
we
yeah.
take that times 10.
Totally.
But all right, so we were talking about your partnership. So go back to what you were talking about with that, because you were talking about molding. You were trying to mold your partner and everything, and I interrupted you with that little side
Yeah.
conversation. So
Yeah. So for me, it was just this thought piece of like, I think in my head of like, uh, my own issues, like of expectation, you know what I mean? And so I put that all on me. And then there's this, so then like we had our roles divvied out and everything else. So then he, at the point when it was finally decided, it was pretty quick. It was about 2 weeks, and then in and out pretty fast. I think most of the like for me, like I don't know right away. We didn't like, and when I say we, like Gretchen and I didn't have a true like moment of like relief, like you were talking about, or what have you, in a sense, and not for quite a while because it was more like we were in crisis, right? Like for and it's in just we had to wake up, we had to focus on the business. What are we going to do to get this thing to churn again, to get it to move? And so, I mean, we had the cases coming in, we had the case load. It's an issue at the back end on the churn rate. And so that's kind of really where our focus became. We didn't have a lot of time to sit and think about that. We had some other bigger decisions we had to make pretty quickly about payroll and team and things like that. So I think it's one of those things for us is we don't have that. And then the thing too, maybe that might have been a little different too is we were friends for a pretty long time, and that's and I've been married to Gretchen for almost 30 years. I knew Jake for almost 20, and it's like a divorce. I mean, it really, like the thing people need to understand is partnerships, and I've thought about it a lot lately, is like it is literally a second marriage. Like if you're going to get into one, you have got to treat it like another marriage. It really is. And so if your current marriage is not that good and strong, I pause you against getting into a part. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you can't like balance two marriages if one is already rocky.
yeah.
And so I think it's one of those things like you cannot do it. It just can't happen.
That is interesting. And I think you're right. Something I've thought quite a bit with the. Go ahead. So something I've thought about quite a bit is with the breakup with me and Chris.
Yeah.
We never had those like really intimate
Yeah.
conversations that we should have had. We did a lot of the who does this and what are we going to call it and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Well, it's funny because like it's so funny because Jim and I talk a lot about this. Where like worry about the name last, but there was a big like we did talk a lot about the name. Is it his last name first, my last name. That was
Right.
like, it was such a big deal, I
Yeah.
think. And it was like, instead of like, that's not important. We should have been talking about, okay, let's talk about the money more. Like, what's your financial situation? What's your financial
Right.
situation? What happens if this happens? And we didn't have any of those conversations.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too of really trying to get the vision to align. So those conversations help get like the joint vision to
Yeah.
ultimately come in align. And I think that's again, I agree with you. I think it's one of the areas where I like or we, together probably cumulatively failed to not fully get it aligned in that sense of
Yeah.
like really like what do you know what I mean? It's that question of like what do you want and where you hit it over and over and over again is like really, what do we really, really want out of this? What do we really want it to look like? What do you know what I mean? And all
Yeah.
of those things. So,
At what point? So that you had yours was seven
yeah.
years, mine was 18 months, right? So
Okay.
completely different. But 7 years. At what point though did you realize that your paths were not aligned?
I think it was probably potentially, I would say maybe after my partner stopped taking cases. I think because he struggled with an identity shift of being an attorney to now going being a managing partner who doesn't have cases and is just overseeing. I think it was a thing where he didn't, and these were conversations that we would have all the time of like, I don't know what to do. Is this right? And he both enjoyed it, I think, and didn't. I don't, at this point, I don't know. But I would say that that may have been one of the bigger struggles.
Interesting. I wonder, and you don't go to specifics. I
Yeah,
don't I don't need to
yeah.
know, but I do wonder, did you all, when you kind of realized, and he was probably realizing at the same time, I mean, did you all ever have those like deep conversations about what needs to change to kind of get you back on track?
Probably not then. And it's an interesting thing as I was listening to this thing at the gym the other day where this, I think it was it might have been at both, but I'll just from speaking for myself, my inability to actually just speak up at the time, right? Because there's always I think most people think that lawyers just want to have conflict all the damn time. I hate
Yeah,
conflict. I
it's
think it's
terrible.
unnecessary and
Yeah,
it's just stupid. And so my kids say I have this like innate ability to just like walk away from shit and just get away, if
it's an
things are going on.
amazing ability, by the way.
And so but it's this idea of this thing I was listening to where he talks about truth. He's like, so here's the thing. We all think in our head, we have this. So, like you and I know I've got to have a hard conversation with you. So, in my head, what do? I predict the outcome of how you're going to react. And then I pattern now what I'm going to say to you based on what I believe that outcome is going in my head, what it's going to be. He's like, you're wrong. So instead, do this. Say what you need to say. So, say the truth first of what you believe or what you want to talk about. Then just let that outcome be what it is. And so if you can do that, which is again, that takes a lot of break, your own self break, but it takes you getting out of your own head and kind of moving forward that way.
I I don't know how it's possible to ignore
The
what you
what,
think the outcome's going to
but
be.
it's a world of what ifs, right? Because
Right.
no matter what predictive analysis you run, odds are you're wrong. Think about it like any time that you've gone to like terminate somebody, you already have in your head how it's going to go down. Has it most times it generally doesn't go as bad as what you're thinking. Now, every now and then there's the outliers, but most of the time you're like, ah, it wasn't that bad.
I've
You know
had
what I mean?
twice where it
Sure.
was
It's
significantly worse
sure,
than I thought it
sure,
was going to
totally.
be.
But it still didn't fit within that mold of where you were at, right? And so, but it's just those kind of things where, and I've had that too, but it's like overall is like we can't, no matter what, you can't predict it.
Yeah, I've
So why
had.
not just say it and live with it and go with the other end?
I don't know if you had this, but I've had these. I think with cases and other things, but like with cases specifically, I kind of hold off. I've got this thing, this issue with the case, and I'm stressing about it for months or
Hmm.
weeks maybe.
Hmm.
And then I talk to whoever I need to talk to about it, whether it's a client or the opposing attorney, whatever.
Yep.
And then how many? I can't tell you how many times it's like, oh, it's not. There was nothing. There
Yeah.
was nothing to worry
Right.
about
Right.
at all.
Right.
It's amazing how many times we have things like that in our
Yes.
lives
Yes.
that we just do the thing, whatever
Yeah.
you need to do.
Right. You got to like rip the band-aid off and just do it.
That's tough.
Yeah. There is one thing within the whole partnership piece, and I think it can go this way with your partner, with anybody within your firm that may be up at a higher level or what have you. And it's a thing I ended up reading the other day where it was this idea of blame. And there's the three levels of blame. And I think it's important because I've thought about it a lot since I read it. And it's this idea of so phase one is the lowest level is you blame the other person. Everything's their fault. Everything that went wrong, all of the issues, their fault. Phase two, blame yourself. As the leader, and it's the thing I took on immediate, everything bad that has happened to the firm, to the business, all of it, it's all my fault. I'm the leader. Because anything good that happens within the business, the team did it all, right? Everything good happened because of the team. Everything bad happened because of me. But then phase three is actually, to me, is this great area. You blame no one. It's no one's fault. It just is. And it's brilliant because it's just a thing that happened and people move on and it's okay. And so it's like this other like odd level of enlightenment where you're just like, it's just a thing that happened. So now the business is still going and it's okay.
How long did it take you to get to that point? Because that's
I read it in about 2 minutes. No,
no, but
but
that's tough,
that,
though.
and I think I'm getting there. It takes work, but it takes a lot of time to go and just say, it's okay. Like it, and I think the sooner that you can do that and let go of blame of the other, blame of yourself, then I think you move to a better spot.
I think that's a really a really important lesson. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think my initial response, and this may be just like human nature, like it's just like who's at fault, like.
Absolutely.
But I am good at backing it off and saying, okay, like how am I at fault for this? Which is probably not right either.
Right.
That is a different level. That's just a different way of thinking completely.
Mm-hmm.
That is tough. But I do like that. Like just. But let me ask you this. I do sometimes maybe think that some people would take that to never hold someone accountable, which is something different.
Yeah, I mean, I think within this all, right, is like I think you have to go through those kind of that cycle too, because there's lessons within each of those going, okay, well, what could I have done differently? Like, what things can I learn? How would I react going forward? What, kind of, you know what I mean? How would I push? What things would I have done differently? Um, and there's a growth pattern. I mean, it's that idea of, like, you ever have those friends that get divorced and then right after they get divorced, like now they become like, prior to that, they were just like gamers who sat around and ate potato chips. But then right after the divorce, now they're like entering fitness competitions and shit.
Yeah.
So it's this whole like rebranded version of themselves now on who they are post divorce. And so it's almost like that too, there's these like things that you now kind of learn about yourself as you're going through those questions that you have to rebrand a little bit and things that you learn about yourself.
Yeah. I've always wondered though with those people, are they Mark? Some of them may be like, okay, I'm gonna show you I'm better than you.
Yeah.
But part of it, I wonder if like, are those things that you should have been doing during the marriage to, or like it could one of two things. Maybe you could have been doing that during the
Right.
marriage and you wouldn't have a divorce.
Yes.
Or are those things that you didn't do because of the marriage?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because marriage is an important part of this. You talked about
Yeah.
like it's like if you have a bad marriage, you shouldn't get into a partnership.
Right.
That's an important piece of this.
Yeah.
So like there are certain things you should do during the marriage to keep
Hmm.
the marriage together. Same thing with the partnership. Like there's certain things during the partnership you should do to keep the partnership together.
Yes.
So is there anything like that with your partnership that you look back and you like, I should have been doing these things for the benefit of the partnership?
I think it's those, honestly, it's to me, and the first thing is those open conversations, really open and deeper. I mean, obviously we knew each other really well, but not well enough. And then I think it's I think when you do these things from the jump, what did Gretchen's contract professor said? There's no such thing as a contract that's too short, or that's not long enough. So our contracts were way too short. We never had enough stuff spelled out. So that like the the rainy day clauses or the alien abduction clauses or whatever else it may be, right? You think of all that wackadoodle shit, and you're just like, why didn't we have that in there? Why didn't we have this, right? Because so it's just like, hey, we're two buddies, let's go ahead and do this thing, and life's just going to be awesome. Well, I think you still have to plan for that stuff because you have to have some really honest conversations from that at the jump, going, if this doesn't work, where's that clause on if this doesn't work, what does this look like?
Yeah.
And I think you're not thinking of it in a spot at the get go because it's everything sunny days and everything's fun and nice.
So you talked about how you knew him for 20 years.
Hmm.
There's knowing somebody and that there's knowing
Oh yeah,
somebody.
yeah.
And were there signs early on that you maybe that yeah, you knew him, but yeah, maybe this isn't a good idea for a partnership?
So I call this it's the Daughtry effect.
Okay.
So you know Daughtry, the singer from American Idol.
I was going to ask you what the hell you're talking
Yeah.
about.
So
Okay.
Chris Daughtry.
I know who that is. I couldn't tell you what anything
So
else about him.
so we watched one season. I think that was the only season of Idol that we ever watched way back in the day. So Daughtry's a country singer, I think, a rock and roller, or I don't know, whoever, right? And
Becca's giving you the no, not a country, but
he's a
he's a
rock and
yes.
roll guy. He's a rock and roll guy. And so the thing we loved, like when we first saw Daughtry, comes out, gives us a little like 2 minute spiel on his family and stuff like that. You know, guy working it up the route, and good dude. And goes out, sings a great song. They love him. He gets through. Then what we end up though is this idea of the Daughtry effect, which it starts, and it's just like we know. So there we're like we know him, but we don't really know him. And then it's like now the vignettes get a little longer. Now it's like 5 minutes of like his sob story. I don't, or whatever it may be, right? Made for TV. But it's just like, how much do I really want to know Daughtry versus just listen to his music and just kind of know him a little bit? You know what I mean? In that sense. And so I think it's like that idea of like, how much do you actually really know somebody? I mean, what I've realized even from all of this is like, there's probably only three people in my life that I really know. And it's my wife and my two girls. That's it.
Yeah.
Even my brothers. Fuck, man, I don't know. Maybe. You know, I mean, we talk a lot, we see each other here and there, but we really know each other that deeply? I don't know. And so, yeah.
So that is interesting. There is I was watching, I think it was Joe Rogan had somebody on in the last few months, and they were talking about that. If you can expand that,
Hmm.
that because there's like different layers to it,
Yes.
right? Where you've got like this internal circle that
Hmm.
knows you, and then there's a circle outside of that,
Yep.
like your immediate family, I guess extended family, and all that. That's kind of like in that circle.
Yep.
They know you,
Uh huh.
but they don't know you know
Right.
you.
Right.
And then like outside that is people. Yeah, I know, Chris.
Yeah.
You know, like and
Yes.
then there's probably another circle right
Sure.
outside that, but there are these levels of knowing people that
Hmm.
are important, and if you can expand that inner circle,
Yeah.
it does lead to more happiness in your life.
Interesting. That's interesting because I've had this thought lately too, where it's this idea of like friends, right? Because we've all got, it's like the thing from Fight Club, I feel like in life these days, right? Where we all have single serving friends. And so it's the idea of like, but then I see and I look around and I've got like these, you know, like, you know, as I see through the community or what have you, people that they happen to go play pickleball with, or they do this other stuff with, or what have you. And so I'm like, is it a thing? So I've told myself lately, I'm like, I want to be more intentional about finding friends. Then it feels like middle school again, where I'm just trying to be that awkward kid who tries to go butt into it. But during the 12-hour walk, one of the interesting things I thought about was maybe I actually don't need it. Maybe I'm actually good because maybe and not that that circle should stay tight forever that way, but with what I've got, it's pretty good. So why not just enjoy the friendships and actually foster maybe that other level here more than and to make it to expand out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then instead of trying to just be like, you know, like Oprah giving away cars, instead of you get a friend, you get a friend, you get a friend type of a thing. So I don't know.
I would say this. I would agree with that approach more than the single serving friend type.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that way, but it is amazing how like you do sometimes have these like deep friendships, or at
Hmm.
least I do.
Yeah.
I'm assuming other people do, but you don't. Your experience with that person is very limited.
Yeah.
And I'll just use. I don't. I'm just gonna make this one up, but like so for jujitsu for me, I'm not able to do it now because I got a shoulder injury, but that like I could see where like I've got like really deep friendships only in the jujitsu
Yes.
community,
Yes.
but they don't know the name of my kids,
I
name of
was
my
going to say,
wife, things
yeah.
like that, which
Yes.
I think those are kind of like prerequisites of actually knowing
Sure.
somebody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think that with what you're talking about, I think that that's right. If you were to, so instead of having all these
Yeah.
spread out, which I think are important,
Sure.
okay, focusing on that circle and focusing on you, I think that probably would. I think you're onto something. I think that probably would lead to more happiness.
Well, and I also, don't you think too, though, it's the idea that if you're actually okay here internally, then maybe you don't need this. Maybe
Yeah,
you're actually okay with this. If you're okay with you, And so I'm pretty okay with who I am.
Well, those circles
Yeah.
are all negatively affected if you're not okay with them.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree with
Yeah.
you.
So
Right. So I want to shift gears a little bit.
do it.
On April 19th of 2013,
Okay.
you said, "I am a victim of my own decisions." Hashtag choices.
Okay.
Go back to that time, if you can remember. What were you thinking? What was that about?
I feel like I should be eating hot wings right now. But I have no clue. So I have a good memory in some areas, bad in the others. So that time in my life, I'm getting ready to graduate law school. So I'm a 3L, almost done.
So yeah, this is
Yeah,
2013.
in 2013. So yeah, I finished then. It's either, and what was the quote again? I'm a victim of,
I am a victim of my own decisions.
well, it could have been that too. I could have just been, what the fuck am I doing in law school here again? And
Yeah.
it's just one of those pieces there, would be my thought. It's either a movie quote or it's something where I was actually just really like, what am I doing?
So April, it was April. So
Yeah.
when you
Almost ready to
yeah,
graduate.
so you're approaching
Yeah.
graduation.
Yeah. Getting ready for bar.
Job prospects at the time, anything?
Yes, I had worked at a small law firm up in Woodland Park, which is a small mountain town, for a family law attorney. And so knew that I was going to more than likely end up going to do family law with him right after.
What was it like working for a smaller firm?
It's all I've ever done. And then everything was, I mean, you're tight in with the boss and highs and lows of any sort of like, I mean, when all lawyers go through like how to, like employee etiquette training and how to manage a law firm, everyone went through that, I believe, which is total BS. It's, you know what I mean? There's this total thing where it's like it was good. I mean, for me at least, it did exactly what I was looking for at the time. And I still today, I like, he's a judge now. I actually respect him quite a bit. Thought he was really good.
It is interesting about like small town attorneys. Many of them just want to be
Yeah,
judges, which
yeah. I have no, I don't know about you. Any desire ever?
none.
Me neither. None.
Amy's aunt and uncle, they bought me a gavel. I think it was right after law school or in law school.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, you can have it when you become a judge. And I was like, well, I'll never become a good
No.
judge.
Yeah, I think it's isolating. The pay to me is limited. The time that it takes away. I mean, we've talked in the past about time, and I just said I don't want anything. That to me, I don't want anything taking that away.
So I've talked in the past about we're talking about time. You're trading hours for years,
Mm,
and it's an interesting concept where like, you're so stuck in the day to day
yeah.
that you end up losing years,
Hmm.
and so you end up accomplishing nothing.
Yeah.
So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
On hours for years. Yeah, like I don't. I guess I look at the way I've looked at time lately has been this idea of I'm at a spot in my life, and even with all the change and flux in the firm and everything else, I'm probably there more now than I was in the past. But in reality, if I needed to, I could probably work 15 to 20 hours a week and make a really good wage.
Sure.
But it's the time back that I have where I can do basically whatever I want. If that's to start a coaching business, or if it's to go out to dinner with my wife, or go grab lunch with her, or to go do a marketing thing, or to go see my kid up in Denver, you know what I mean? What have you. And I think it's when you talk about hours for years, well, the reality there is I can't get back that time to go have lunch with my kid in Denver.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or go meet another attorney. I have an attorney friend up in Denver, or we'll go grab lunch here and there, or what have you. And so it's those kind of things where to have that flexibility. And so it's even my kids, they were talking to me one day and just saying, if everything with Springs Law Group went awry tomorrow and it just closed, they looked at me and they're like, you'd be the worst employee ever. And they're like, it's not because you'd be an asshole. It's just because like you want to be good at it because you know too much. It's Oz, right? You pulled the curtain and you now know what Oz looks like, so you'd be terrible at it. And so it's that kind of an idea too.
Yeah. So you were talking about like going to see your daughter in Denver, or whatever. But it is interesting because that those are the choices we have every day,
Hmm.
right? So you could you could spend a couple hours and go see your daughter.
Yeah.
You could spend a couple hours checking email,
Mm-hmm.
or you could spend a couple hours building something that's going to make your firm better.
Yeah.
And most people spend the 2 hours checking email.
Yeah.
And that's that concept of trading hours for years, where next thing you know, 10 years go by and you don't know where they went.
Right. And I think it's well, I mean, for everybody, and you guys have talked about this too on the show, is get a person who can check your email or program. I mean, really. I mentioned Martell a lot, but his first thing is you hire an executive assistant right off the jump. You get them to check your email. And then get people so the 10-80-10 rule, get people, you come up with the idea of this system that you want or this new thing to make your firm better, get somebody to do the 80%. So then you can go have that thing. And then you come back in at the end and check it.
Yeah, the volume of email that an attorney gets these days is quite overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming my email's like your email is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worse than phone calls.
Yeah.
So you have a receptionist, and I've heard people talk about this. They treat email like a receptionist, and I think that's an interesting concept. Email's a little more personal, because it's not like a receptionist, because it's not like the receptionist is listening in on your phone calls.
Right.
It is different in that.
Yeah.
And like your bank transactions, things like that come through.
Right.
So it is different, but it is such an overwhelming thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't know how it's sustainable. I really don't.
Right.
And I think it's one thing, like things like that are such a stressor on the profession,
Mm-hmm.
that we got to find a solution.
Yeah.
One of them is an executive assistant.
I think so. I mean, so mine, she's our office admin, but also takes care of my email. We meet once a week. We've set up certain folders, and she's set up certain automations for other things that can kind of go through. I think you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
And then she'll literally, when we sit down, we'll walk through all of them. And it's quick. I mean, and then we go through other stuff too throughout that needs to happen. But she takes care of all my travel. She booked all of this. I didn't touch any of it. She, what I mean? Everything else, like, she handles all that. And so, like, one of our credit cards just got hacked. She takes care of implementing all the new cards, all that other stuff. So she's vital.
Do you give her guidelines on travel?
I do.
Yeah.
Very specific.
What are they? I want to hear
them. So because Denver's a United hub, so we fly United out of Denver, unless so in the Springs we have a small airport. If I'm going to Phoenix or to Vegas, I'll fly out through the Springs through Southwest. Outside of that, it's United through Denver. I do not do connections. So it's one way if I can. I seat to a row 2 only, so I fly first.
Row 2 only.
If I can. I don't want one. I think one sucks.
Row 1's the worst.
Row 1's the worst because you got to put your shit up.
One is worse than sitting in coach.
I think it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, at this point, I fly first, so 2 or 3, but I prefer 2. If I'm with Gretchen gets the window seat, I get the aisle. If I'm not with Gretchen, I'll take the window. And then that's generally it there. I rent through National, and she's got my membership on that. But yeah, that's pretty kind of the gist on it. So
I like it.
She knows all of it.
It's good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. You were a teacher.
Yeah, I was.
And if you were to go back,
mm-hmm.
If you could become a teacher again,
mm-hmm.
I wonder how you would change the projection of what the way things have gone, if you would at all.
So my teaching experience did not end the way I thought it would. And so I would not change it, though.
Because it ended abruptly, right?
It did end. Yeah, it ended abruptly. Both Gretchen and I, we were non-renewed in the same year. We had just bought a house. And so we're like, what do we do? And then the thought is like, let's go to law school, which made no sense. But the interesting thing now is like looking at it, and I think it's the conversation that I had with Chuck Boyd years ago, where he's like, sometimes he said to me, he's like, sometimes the thing that you think is the worst thing that happened to you ends up being the best thing. And I mean, in retrospect, in the moment, this is terrible. But today, I needed that. I'm so glad I'm actually not a teacher anymore because of the lifestyle that I have. I am in business to create a lifestyle that I want. That is it. Like, I'm happy that we can help people. I'm happy that we provide a service. And I'm really happy for the team that we have that we can do that for them too. But overall, it's to provide a lifestyle. And there's certain things like row two that I want, you know what I mean, or what have you. And I'm okay saying that. And it just, but as a teacher, there's no way I'm probably able to sit in row two.
Would you be a lawyer today if you were renewed on your contract as a teacher?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably not. Yeah.
It's an interesting
I
thing.
don't know if
Like,
I could have seen it
yeah,
at the time.
because I think Chuck's right there. Think about that. Like how that thing that you
Mm,
thought was the worst thing that could have happened
ever.
to you, or close to one of the worst, it ended up being the best thing
Dude,
ever.
Tyson. So the crazy thing is, like, I was like watching Ron Clark. I was like reading Rafe Esquith, who's this teacher down in San Diego. Like all these guys, where it's like you can make a difference in kid. Like I was jazzed. So like the same way, like I listened to all this business shit. Now I was doing it with teacher stuff back then, and I'm just like, this is the thing, right? We can have an impact on kids. We're going to be, create all these lifelong learners, and everything's going to be amazing. But yet now they're just all just on YouTube and playing roadblocks. So I don't know.
What's really interesting is, well, one, I think you'd be an amazing teacher,
Uh,
but I saw you light up more talking about that
yeah,
than I've seen you light up
sure.
about anything else we've
Yeah,
talked about.
yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, I think it's the idea of like how in on something, right? Like, because like if we talk about like growing the business, right, it's the same type of thing, right? Yeah, I can get like jacked about like here's this new, idea, or here's how we can do X or Y. It's the same thing, but here I've got control over it. There, somebody else had control over it. So the reason I'm happy to be an attorney, because part of the reason though too that law school became the thing is it's the one so they can take away my ability to teach because it's reliant upon somebody else. They can't ever take away my bar. I mean, they could, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I got to do some stupid shit, but like they can't take away and my ability to own the firm, and so that's all on me. There's a lot of controllables on that I've got there, so that I really like.
Good point. Especially being an employee in general, like that's
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
yeah,
You were talking about you'd be a terrible employee. Yeah,
right.
you. I mean, I think most law firm owners would
I
be
like to think
terrible
I'd be a
employees.
good employee, but I would be compliant, in that sense.
I think I could be a good employee, but I'd probably be
Well, I think it'd be
miserable.
terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like they don't want me showing up whenever I want to show up.
Right. No,
I mean,
no,
like here's the thing:
no.
like if I worked like an employee, like I worked like a business owner, like they would love me. Like
Right,
so,
right.
so
But then you
maybe
may
I'm not
not because your buy-in wouldn't be theirs. Right. Yeah.
exactly. All right, so I want to ask you about something else that you posted on July 5th
Of
of this year.
oh,
So just recently.
sure.
Your grades do not define you! Exclamation point. So your grades do not define you. I was a C student in law school.
Oh,
I failed the bar exam.
yep.
Today I run a seven-figure law firm and have a team that is helping build each day.
Hmm.
I agree with those things. Um, what compelled you to make that post?
So I think you got that off X.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I very rarely post on X, and trying to get I watched this course on posting on X, but what compelled me to post that is this idea too, though, that I think so we're big fans of Survivor at my house, and Survivor's a closed world, right? And I play a lot of Fortnite. Fortnite's a closed world. I think school generally, if it's high school, undergrad, law school, medical school, what have you, it's a closed world. And we've talked about this idea of what do people do that don't know what they want to do with their lives? They go back to school to get more schooling. Why? Because it's a safe, closed world. But watching, and I think at the time too, I'm watching Gretchen kind of go through this like the hierarchy, right? She has, friends who will text her and be like, "Hey, grades are in. What are we doing?" And then Gretchen's like, "I don't care. I've already got X." But there's a little part of her that does care because she wants to achieve and do well for herself. Um, but it's that passing, kind of thing of like the one-upsmanship within the law student world. And so remember, like in law school too, I don't know if they did this at yours too, is that idea of like look to the left, look to the right. Only one of you will be here at
Yeah.
the end, which is bullshit because it's a place that wants to make money. So they're going to keep everybody in. Um, so I was after Toledo, after my first year, I was actually in my first semester at Denver, I was put on academic probation because I had gotten some C's. And so I had to do this like extra bullshit course and then did that and went through it and what have you. The reality is is I'm like, I couldn't, at the time, I was like, I need to go be a DA, I need to go be a public defender or what have you. I couldn't get into either of them. Um, and, and then ended up doing the family law thing, but none of it shifted truly until I took ownership of it all and just went out on my own. And so I went out on my own with just 3 family law clients and had my own firm. And whenever I first started, and it was just me, and built it up to about 20 to 25 and then forked up. But but I'm like, it's not the great, like it isn't the great. It's like when is the last time that you've interviewed somebody or you've asked them what their law school grades were?
Never.
And you don't ever, right? I could care less, period, about any of it. But in that moment, the reason I posted it is like, it's such a, mind fuck that it just like, it really screws with you on like, if I don't do X, I'm not going to get into big law. Who truly wants to work big law? You think you do. So it's this idea lately that I've had about the reality versus or the idea versus the reality, right? The idea. I want a big law. I need the grades. I need this status, all these things. The idea of it sounds great. The reality, idea. I want to learn to play the mandolin. I love it. Reality. I can't read music. I've never played an instrument. And whenever I sat through my first few lessons, I'm like, fuck, I'm terrible at it. And it's going to take me forever. So I'm a person, I want results pretty quickly. And so it's like, so now I've got a mandolin sitting in my office that just sits there.
It's a nice
Nice
talking
talking
piece.
piece. Yeah,
Good talking
exactly.
piece.
Exactly.
How would you change law school?
I've seen things lately where it's like a 2-year program with a practicum, or like a residency. I think it needs a residency component, of some form, period. That where you get credit for like a long term, like the last year. If you're going to keep it 3, make 2 years actual classes. I'm watching what Gretchen's doing. I'm sure I had many. I know that I had many of them. I'm sure you did too. Classes that are just BS that have no practical ability at all. Like it's rock and roll law or what? Like what? Because I think you're paying way too much money for something that is way too important to not have any practicality for potential practice or potential bar exam. Because the struggle with it too is if you just get your JD, none of it matters. I mean, I don't know what kind of jobs, and I'm sure people are getting jobs out there with just a JD, but it's the bar. It is the bar, period. That is it.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating to me too is 1L, I struggled on, certain classes or what have you. Like I remember I took Civ Pro from a professor first, and I didn't learn hardly anything. You just a lot of pontification, a lot of verbose
Eerie
blah blah
doctrine.
blah. Yeah, didn't learn anything. But then you take the Barbary study, and I'm like, why wasn't this taught here, way back here, this way? And so why not just teach the Barbary courses as the class
100%.
every time in the beginning?
Yeah.
Because if this is the thing we're studying for at the end, so it's kind of like I was just at a trial training, and they were talking about when they start up a case for litigation, the first thing they do is they get as they're drafting the complaint and doing the case review, they draft their jury instructions right then. They're like, and here's why. Because if we don't know the end, which now with law school we do, right, the bar, why wouldn't we start getting to that right at the beginning? So now if we know our jury instructions and what we're looking for, everything we're doing is geared towards that thing at the end. And so why not do that?
I agree with that to a certain extent.
Right.
I do worry there's a risk with that maybe you would have tunnel vision, and because there's other claims out there. Several times you've seen this where you have a case where you think it's one thing,
Sure,
and you add a ton of value
Yeah.
to these other things. So as long as you have contingencies to account for that,
yeah,
I would agree with that model.
Uh-huh.
And we don't do it that way, but I understand. And that's something that I have told our younger attorneys, like, you need to be thinking about the MAI. So we don't draft them, but
yeah,
you need to be thinking that our
Sure.
MAIs are our jury instructions.
okay,
So you need to be thinking about what those look like
yeah,
at the beginning of the case, because it does help you formulate it.
right,
But, I do think, just flat out drafting them, because what happens is I don't know if you've seen this, but
Mhm.
sometimes if it could be something as simple as that. So let's go with that
Sure.
idea. Your staff follows the guidance of the attorney and the
Mhm.
lead of the attorney.
hmm
if all that's all, they might just look at the MAIs and think
and not see anything else outside
exactly.
these other outlier pieces. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's a concern. Like, so you're talking about, I'm interviewing witnesses, I'm interviewing the
Mm-hmm.
client. I'm not thinking about anything else because I've got those jury
Right. Right.
instructions.
Right.
So I think that that's a concern. But I mean, he's a very smart
Yeah.
person, so
Sure.
he's probably got
Sure.
contingencies for that.
Yeah.
Um, let's let's go. This is the last thing we'll talk about. It's mindset, and we've talked about some of the mindset
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Right? I do like your mindset on things. Mindset is not about thinking positive thoughts and being happy. Mindset takes work and intentionality. You have to make a choice and take action. So talk
Mm-hmm.
about that a little bit.
So within all the like the changes and transitions that have happened this year, like we were talking about earlier, the partnership changes, the I've had employee changes and things like that. I was actually talking to Kelsey one day on a call, and he's like, dude, he's like, you have this innate ability that he talks to a lot of other attorneys, and he's like, I don't see it in a lot of them where you pivot and move a lot faster than most people, instead of kind of like sitting down in the muck and mire, right, of all of it. And I do think there's a moment where you need to sit and feel it, but then you've got to move. And so for me, it's just one of those things of like, I look at it as like, what else are you going to do? I don't have enough time to have like a pity party for Chris or do whatever else. And if I did, like, I don't know what purpose it's serving. Um, and so I consider myself I'm a, I'm an eternal optimist. I talked to Joey a little while back about the idea of unrealistic optimism, but it's this whole like Hormozy. Have you seen the Hormozy S curve?
No, but I want to
But
hear. I want to hear more about
and
the
so,
unrealistic optimism. I know
but
what you're talking about. I
it,
think,
but
but
it can. So it's this idea. I think for the longest time, that's kind of where I was hitting. Um, it's shiny object. It's everything's great. You know what I mean? We're just woo, and because it's this thing too of like if The Secret or other things like if I will it, what I think a lot of that in the universe and everything else can be really really helpful, but all of that stuff has to be in conjunction with action, and so that's where it takes intentionality and true work to actually instead of me and my mindset just going, hey, everything's just going to be great. Well, I've got to do those things too to help make everything be great, right? We have to take action, we have to pivot, we have to move, we have to go. And so that's what shifted me from unrealistic optimism to kind of further down the S curve, which I can walk through.
yeah, it's a lot like the mood follows action, like the
Yeah.
rich roll stuff. Like mood
Yeah.
follows action, or yeah, oh yeah, mood follows action.
Hmm.
So you do have to do those things. It is important to have that positive mindset because if you've got that negative mindset, it can be really damaging.
Oh,
Other
absolutely.
things, but if if you're with that unrealistic optimism, there is a lot of people that where they're always happy about things, or
Hmm.
at least they project
Sure,
happiness.
sure.
I don't know if they're necessarily happy, but they can't figure out why they can't achieve anything.
Right,
It's because they're not doing it.
right, right.
And that's why I like about your post is it. I disagree with mindset is not about thinking positive thoughts. I think it's both.
Yeah.
But the most important component of that, I think that's what you're getting at,
But
is taking the
yeah,
action.
because I think people just think that if I think positive thoughts, everything will work out. And it's not true. Yeah, I don't, you can't just will it. Like, and there's that extra component you need with it completely.
At what point did you learn that though? I can't assume you've had it from the beginning.
No, I think it's just I think it's through years of failing. Honestly, like just messing up and, falling down and then finally being able to get a little bit of momentum, right? You get a win and then you're like, okay, this can work. And then, okay, this can work. But I think if through the years, if I hadn't, because dude, within my over 5 pages of jobs that I had on the bar application, like years of just going, why does every other person have this whole thing figured out? They all know what they want to be, but I can't figure this stuff out. And so it's this idea of I had a good friend, he's an anesthesiologist, and I'm like, how the hell did he know at 18 he wanted to be an anesthesiologist? I didn't even know what that was at 18. And yet it's because, having parents or that circle, right, of like, and knowing people are like that. I didn't have that. And so it's just like you try this, and a lot of it for us early on was just survival. But then it's like you do this and fail, do this and fail, do this and fail, and it's like then at some point it finally clicks because you just try so many times that something just hits.
You mentioned failure, so I do want to talk about that. Did you Did you view your partnership as a failure?
No, even today, I don't. There's things that, no, I don't. I mean, I think there's things, again, like I said, that I wish I would have said earlier on, but now I don't feel it as a failure. We've got, so we each put, like, right, if I remember right around 3 grand in. Where uh, we've been a 7-figure company for the last 4 or 5 years. We consistently, I mean, we have a team of about 16. And so, no, no, it's not a failure.
So what I want to do is I like the way you view that. So let's focus on the success of that. And
Sure.
in my opinion, your best years are ahead of you. I think you're
Hmm.
doing awesome things. When you look at that partnership, like what are the things you're the most proud of?
Um, so within the partnership, so I'll look at it, can I look at it both the partnership and the business as like,
Absolutely.
so I think within the partnership, it was the experiences that we had together. Um, It was the ability for him and I, him and I, or the me, Jake, and Gretchen, to all go to like certain events to go through. We went to a really interesting like emotional intelligence retreat. We've done trips together, the masterminds, Fishers, things like that. Like those pieces are pockets of memories that I have that were huge successes, and that I look at as like I'm a big fan of like the experiences in life because those are the I like stuff, but like at the end of the day, those it's the experiences that those are the way I want. That's the way I want to look back on it. If it's doing a retreat with Melissa, Velocity Work, or what have you, like doing those kind of things is the way I look at it as huge successes.
What about the business?
The business, honestly, for me, the biggest success is actually being an attorney who owns a law firm who has been able to fully transition out of having a caseload. I haven't had a case in over 2.5 years, and I love it. I think it's possible. I think anybody can do it if you want it. And I don't have the hangups though of not having cases. I think if you have that, don't do it. If you want to do cases, do it. But for me, that's a huge success because I really enjoy I treat so when people say like I feel lost without cases or clients, treat your team like that. Your team's your clients. Like what are you going to do for them to help make it better? And so that's a huge success for me. Is like I consider myself a huge so I'm an older what I just turned 49, so like I consider myself a John Stockton of the firm now, right? So just how can I assist? What can I do to help? What tool can I get you? What information can I get you? But everybody else does this stuff, and how can I watch that kind of thing just move and churn? And so, yeah, that's kind of been the stuff that's the way I find it to be successful.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
Yep.